People tell us every week that our information has helped save their life. If you agree that this is helpful information, please like, share, and most of all, subscribe, because nothing makes a channel like subscriptions. You know, those of you who follow the channel know that I'm a big low-carb diet fan. I used to focus more on low-fat, a little bit of plant-based tendency, although I've switched from low-fat to low-carb. And there are clear reasons for it. Some of it has to do with the ability to lose weight, but that's not the biggest issue because it's what works for your body if you become insulin resistant. Well, you say, well, that's a small amount of people, right? No, it's over half of us. You say it's only for older people, right? Well, if you define older as age 30 and above, and if you're in your teens and 20s, 30 is older, but I joined Medicare next month. I'm 65. So to me, 30 is very, very young. And by the time you get into your 60s, well over half of us have very significant insulin resistance, prediabetes. So that's a major focus for it. But let's go back. This study really didn't look at the metabolic components. It didn't look at cardiovascular inflammation. It didn't look at any of that. It just looked at weight loss. So, what was the study and where was it? It was in Lancet. Lancet's a well-known global journal in England. The British Medical Journal and Lancet are the two big journals in England. This was back in 2015. It was a few years ago. It was research done at Harvard. Walter Willett. Those of you who know the diet space probably have heard the name Walter Willett. He's been in a lot of stuff. You may know the name David Ludwig. David Ludwig is someone that I quote a lot. And as you see, both of these gentlemen, the researchers, are co-authors in this article. Ludwig is a big low-carb guy. He's an endocrinologist. He and David Lustig, both of them are endocrinologists. David Lustig runs the obesity unit at UC San Francisco. He wrote Sugar, the bitter truth. What is it? Pure white and addictive or something. He's written a lot of stuff about sugars and especially fructoses. David Ludwig has written books on low-carb diet as well. His book is kinder, gentler, and to me, far more effective. It's called Always Hungry. Both of them talk about the hormonal mechanisms of weight loss. So this was a systematic review, again, out of a research team at Harvard. The research was on the effectiveness of low-fat diets for weight loss, and it basically showed mixed results until recently. So they said, here, let's take a look. It was a systematic review, a meta-analysis. In other words, they looked at multiple studies, and we'll go a little bit deeper into what that means on the next slide. It summarized the evidence of randomized controlled trials lasting a year or more, in which changes in low-fat diets versus other diets was compared. The authors included trials lasting a year or more, comparing the change of low-fat diet with any higher-fat dietary intervention, for example, low carbs. The outcome of interest was long-term, 1 year or more, change in body weight. Like I said, nothing about cardiovascular inflammation, nothing about hemoglobin A1C, nothing about different bioindicators of autophagy, nothing about any of the bioindicators of longevity except one. But that one is a very powerful one, and that is BMI or body weight. Trials where one group included non-dietary weight loss were excluded. In other words, if you tried to do it through exercise, those were not included. The authors calculated in both groups. Here's the results. First of all, they looked at 53 randomized clinical trials. It included 68,128 adults. 20 of these trials included patients with chronic diseases. Interventions ranged from very low fat, they classified that as 10% fat or less, to moderate goals of 30% fat or less. One of the questions is, what do you mean by percent fat? Is that grams or percent calories? The meta-analysis included 68,128 adults in these 53 randomized clinical trials. The mean weight loss or average weight loss was 2.71 kilograms. 7 pounds, something like that, for those of us in the pound world. The standard deviation, that's what SD stands for. The standard deviation was 2.8. The citations identified and screened the total universe of studies. There were 3,517 studies that they looked at. Full text articles were assessed for eligibility, 338. So with the 3,517, they already ruled out 3,200 of them. It wasn't a randomized clinical trial. It didn't use dietary means, or for some other reason, they knocked it out of the study. Once they took that first cut, there were 333 randomized clinical trials where full articles left. Then they rejected another 280. Reasons for rejection. 17 of them were non-randomized. 44, there was less than a year follow-up. In 52, there was no low-fat diet comparison of interest. 13, multi-component interventions. In other words, you couldn't really tell what they did because they did so many different things. On 38 of the studies, they didn't even give you the weight outcome. So as you see, you get deeper and deeper, and there were plenty of reasons. There always are. When you do a meta-analysis, it just helps you understand how bad most studies are. People talk about studies, they quote studies all the time, and then they don't realize most studies are really, really bad. And so this is not unusual for a good meta-analysis of studies to start with over 3,000 and end up with 53 really good randomized clinical trials, which are good science and include clarity of the processes and then good clarity of the outcomes. What were the results? And these are called Christmas tree plots over on the other side. I won't go into that. Or whisker plot is a better term for it. Here's the results. Low carb weight loss led to an average of 1.15 kilograms. In other words, a couple of kilograms or greater long-term weight loss than low-fat weight loss intervention. Low-fat diets. How do low-fat diets do compared to others? The reality was the low-fat diet did work, but the low-carb diet worked better. It was a little bit less than 50%, but again, they worked better. No differences were found when comparing low-fat diet versus higher fat interventions. Compared with groups only following their usual diet, both worked. The low-fat diet weight loss worked, and they led to 5.4, I think that meant pounds, not kilograms, better weight loss. So what does all this mean? Low-fat dietary interventions, they don't work better than low carb. Low carb diet interventions do have a significant, modest but significant increase in weight loss. Now, again, this is talking about weight loss only. This is not talking about other health-related issues. I would also point out these studies did not differentiate between people who have insulin resistance and people who don't. I suspect that you would get a significantly better input or better result from people that have insulin resistance, because for most of us, that's why we're gaining weight. Low-fat interventions were favored only in comparison with lesser intensity interventions. Weight loss findings in other studies and trials were shorter duration or less than a year. So again, low-fat diets do work. I know that. I used one for 30 years. I recommended them for 30-something years, and then I changed. So that's it for today's long content.